So this is just a demo on how I've been using the workbook, and I'm going to bring up a image. Yeah, so let's see. I'm going to share my screen in a minute, and then we can work with this image and then see if there's any questions. All right. So can people see this thing kind of, sort of?
Yes.
All right, let me get rid of this. All right. So this is from the Bonnie Weiss workbook. And that workbook is full of exercises. And this is just one. And this is, when I first started working with the workbook, I was mostly working with a unblending exercise, which is earlier in the book. I think it's around page 30 or something like that. And this is on page 46. So it's the Bonnie Weiss self-therapy workbook for those who aren't familiar with it. And let's see. No, we can just turn that off. So there's a few things. So this is a protector page, and what I've done is I've found some different partners who want to do this kind of work. And what we do is we kind of meet and we talk, and then we flip roles. And generally it's about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes because I'm the client for half an hour, and the other person reads the questions, and then the other person becomes the client for the other half an hour, and then I read the questions. And on page 45, which you don't have, there's a little bit of an introduction to this exercise. And on page 47, there's an example of the kinds of things that people might answer. So usually when I go to a meet, when I meet up, I come with a ready to talk about a part already. So I kind of have a part that I want to work with. And when I'm sort of the therapist, it's what's really great about this page and these exercises, and is because it's a great guide, but I also can't completely just read the script. Sometimes I need to think on my feet. So for instance, I can just, as an example, say, to the other person, okay, you have a part in mind, and the other person might give me a little bit of a 2-minute, 1-minute explanation of the part. And then I say, okay, what does the part do? And so like me or the other person, I kind of go, I like to lay on my bed and just kind of zone out, like go into like a trance state almost, because it's just me in this part. And actually people could do this exercise by themselves, but I find it really difficult to switch roles between the client and the therapist. Although maybe I could try to work harder at that. But I also find it that I'm more socially accountable than personally accountable. So when I'm meeting somebody else, this is a lot better. So there's a part I started working with, which is part of my rebellious side, which is called I'm Not Ready Yet. So this part sort of delays, it procrastinates, it resists when somebody's telling me what to do. So this part, I'll say, well, what do you do? Well, I'm protecting you by not letting somebody else manipulate you. I resist people making demands on you, from you getting sucked into someone else's agenda. And then, okay, so then usually what I have to do is when I'm ready, when I've done answering the question, I tell the other person, okay, next question. Because sometimes it takes a while to talk to the part and answer these questions. So then what is your role in my system? So then I ask my part, what is your role in my system? And it's actually going to be similar to the other one. So it's going to be similar to that other question. So sometimes what happens is that these questions sometimes are duplicates. And I can actually say that to the other person, oh, this is a little bit of a duplicate question, but it might be helpful. So then I go about that way. And let me see if I could at least show my face here. No, it keeps going to there. All right, forget it. So then let me try something else. Yeah, let me just stick with that maybe. So Some of these questions, okay, so what do you feel? So I asked the part what it feels, and generally what I get from protectors is, oh, they feel they're important, they do a great role. Now, sometimes what happens is somebody will say, oh, that part feels afraid, it feels scared. And for me, that's a cue that I think that's a different part coming in. That's possibly the exile. And what might happen during this exercise is another part almost hijacks and comes in. And then what I've done sometimes with people is I just flip out of it and I start over. Okay, who's this new part? What do you do? What's your role in my system? Because this is what we call a concerned part, and Bonnie Weiss talks about that. But generally what happens is these questions are quite good. And then we just go through, and it's sometimes trial and error. And what I mean by that is sometimes I have to tell my client, the person who's my analyst or whoever's, just say, oh, well, okay, I already answered that question, just go to the next question. So there becomes a dialogue going back and forth. Some of these are double-barreled questions, and what that means is these two questions are in one. So what are you afraid we would feel or do if you didn't do your role? So feeling and doing are two different things. So I might break this down into two different questions. What are you afraid I would do if you didn't do your role, or that kind of thing? And then at the end, what I end up doing is, there's this, what would you like from me? What would the part like from me? And then I finally end up with, is there anything else? Because I add that, is there anything else? And then say some thank yous. So at the end of every session, there's always, okay, say some thank yous, tell the part, thank you for showing up, that type of thing. And for me, I don't know, somehow, for some reason, the part is always generally very thankful, because no one ever talked to it before. No one ever listened to it. Like, it didn't get a chance to like have a seat at the table and talk. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. I know I'm just kind of talking in an abstract way, but it's a lot more powerful when we do this thing. And then sometimes I show up with a part that I don't think is very important or plays a big role. And I find out it's been working for me since I was 5. It has played a big role, and it sort of blows my mind. So I'll stop there and just see if there's any questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, because I've tried it just a little bit with one person, and I wondered how should you sort of dictate when, let's say I'm being the client and you're being the therapist, and you've asked me a question, and now it's sort of like, do you think it should be up to the client to say, sorry, I think you just said this actually, it should be up to the client to say when they've finished, kind of thing, when they're ready for the next question, rather than the therapist sort of take that upon themselves? Because to be honest, it was a bit kind of tricky. I didn't really know how to do it.
So with every person I've done this with, we've come to agreements, because I say, oh, okay, I'm ready, next question. So the other person tells me what they want to say. Like this other person I was working says they want to say finished. Okay, finished, next question, or okay, or something like that. So those are agreements that need to be made, right? Because nobody wants to feel rushed when talking to a part or trying to, and the part doesn't want to feel rushed. And sometimes, with this third question, what would you like me to call you? So this part says, I'm not ready. So what's your name? My name is I'm not ready. So then when I go to the next question, I could say to my client, okay, ask I'm not ready what they feel. Ask I'm not ready how they relate to people. So we could actually put in the name of the part when we're discussing, or when we're telling the client, because actually it's the client who talks to the part. We just sort of are the guide in that process. And like I said, it's one thing to just look at this and read it and do by it myself. It's another thing for me to like get quiet, get calm, do a little breathing exercise beforehand, and then let somebody else lead me through. And then there's also, the social witnessing thing. I get to express something to somebody else. So I found it very powerful. Any other thoughts or questions? Anything you think I missed?
Yes, I want to ask if you would recommend to do this in person or it doesn't make a difference over the phone or Zoom?
Oh, I think it would be great in person, but I've never had that opportunity. Actually, everybody I work with is on Zoom. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, everybody I work with is in some other city. Yeah, one person's in another country. And then I also make recordings, so I just save the audio and I can listen to it later. Because it's hard to listen sometimes when I'm actually in the sort of the driving seat, if you know what I mean. And then listening to it over again, I get greater insights. And then also some people, there's this one question, okay, for insights into the exile, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do your role? So if the protector didn't do its role, well, it's kind of afraid that the exile would be vulnerable. And so giving the answer to this question sometimes gives insights into who exactly and what the exile is all about. And certainly this one, how long have you been doing your role? A lot of times I get, oh, since I was 2, since I was 8, since I was 5. I had one protector started when I was 25, which I thought was quite fascinating. I didn't think protectors could kick in that late, but that one did. What caused you to take on this role? Some people may not be ready to answer that question if it's too sensitive. So you just pass when the person says pass or something. And then I usually take 2-minute break between, when I have my session and the other person has their session. And if we're pretty task oriented, it's just a half hour, and it's actually quite profound. Most of my sessions are quite profound, even though they're free and we're kind of working with another person. All right, so I'll stop there, and I'll unless there's any thoughts or questions, and I'll turn off the video recording, and then we can yeah, how do I turn this on? Stop sharing. Recording, stop recording.